Great. Well, thank you everyone for being here. I'm so delighted to kick off the presentations at the second ACM EAMO conference. This conference is very near to and dear to my heart, and it's just so cool to see all of us here in person at this conference together. And so I'm very excited to be talking about two-sided benefits of price transparency in informal supply chains. And this will be the first of two talks in this session on incentives in service delivery. Okay, so the setting for service delivery I want you to be thinking about today is smallholder supply chains. Smallholder farmers are producing over 50% of the food calories that are produced in the world. And they form the base or the first mile of many supply chains all over the world. But despite that, there are still a lot of inefficiencies in this first mile of our global supply chains. So just one example of an inefficiency is that in many of these settings, there's very limited information. For example, information about the market opportunities, right? For the farmers, which buyers are buying, what prices are they offering, all of this is generally very opaque and fragmented. And so because of this, there have been a lot of efforts to build digital technology, digital platforms that can help improve transparency in this first mile of the supply chain, and hopefully then make the markets more efficient so that the buyers or the sellers can find the buyers who are buying. And so what I'm going to be talking about today is motivated by one such information platform. This is called Pempem. It was founded by my collaborator, Joann Zegher, who is also an assistant professor at MIT. So one critical question that these platforms often face is, well, is the platform actually beneficial? Okay, so another way to phrase that question is, well, we introduce this platform. It introduces usually some kind of transparency, for example, price transparency. And the question is, how does introducing this transparency affect market prices? And then how does it affect welfare on both sides of the market? And so there's quite a bit of literature on this. For example, in the empirical literature, there's no real consensus on the effect of these information platforms. There are some studies that show that there are no benefits to introducing these platforms. There are other studies where only one side is benefiting, so only the buyers or only the smallholder farmer sellers. And then there's one very famous example from 2007 where there's an example of two-sided benefits. Okay, but there's, by and large, no real empirical consensus. The theoretical literature does have some hypotheses for what we expect to happen. By and large, they kind of come from two separate strands of literature, and they say different things. Okay, so the literature in consumer search says, okay, you introduce these platforms, they're going to allow your sellers to start searching for better buyers. This should drive up competition for the buyers and should be better for the sellers. In contrast, the literature on collusion says, okay, you introduce this platform. Now the buyers have access to information about each other. What this means is that this platform actually allows them to collude, okay, and use price signaling on the platform in order to kind of, in this case, everything's flipped. They're going to lower their prices. They're not going to pay as much to the sellers. And so the benefits are going to go to the buyers. And so our goal today is to provide a theoretical framework for understanding when and how does transparency result in two-sided benefits. What do I mean by two-sided benefits? First, of course, we want to ensure supplier benefits, right? We want to make sure that our smallholder suppliers, these farmers, are able to improve their profit from the introduction of this platform, because we really want to make sure that we're benefiting those most vulnerable members of our global supply chains. Okay, but in addition, we also want to improve things for buyers. Well, why is this? Well, first of all, just in this platform, Pempem, the information on the platform, about 20% of it is crowdsourced from other farmers, but about 80% of the information on the platform is provided directly by the buyers themselves. Okay, so a lot of the value of the platform is provided by the buyers, and if they're not incentivized to stay on the platform because they see that it's actually going to make things worse for them, then that's not going to be good for the effects and value of the platform. In addition, in a lot of these smallholder supply chains, there's some kind of power imbalance, right? Like the buyers are almost some kind of a mini local mafia in some sense. And so you want to make sure that it's going to be a good thing socially for people to be joining your platform. So here's an overview of what I'm going to show you today. Our first contribution is we provide a simple, tractable, and generalizable model of price search in smallholder markets. And we're going to capture in this model a couple of kind of operational details that are very, very common in these first miles of supply chains, but have not really been studied so much in the literature. And these particular aspects that we incorporate are going to allow us to identify conditions where we can actually achieve these two-sided benefits, where introducing information is going to benefit both the buyers and the sellers. And because our model is nice and tractable, we can also break down what are the driving forces of these welfare gains. Okay. Just to preview the theoretical findings, we're going to find that a moderate increase in price transparency leads to two-sided benefits, so a strong Pareto improvement. So this means that both the buyers and the sellers are improving. In addition, we're also going to find, well, there's this common question by the collusion literature, right? What happens if our buyers use the platform to collude? The same driving forces are going to allow strong Pareto improvement even under price collusion. Okay, so with that, let me show you our model. As I mentioned, our motivation is an actual platform. This platform is situated in the Indonesian palm oil supply chain in rural Indonesia. And so our focus today is going to be on this first mile of the global supply chain for palm oil. And so we're looking at smallholder farmers who grow oil palm fruit. These farmers then sell this fruit to transportation middlemen who take the fruit to processors' mills. These are our buyers for today, who then purchase this fruit and process it. And so typically when we think of a market, we're just thinking of this dark blue box over here. But really this box lives within a much longer supply chain. And so the thing we're going to capture today is that these buyers actually have downstream demand commitments as well. So they're often in contracts with those who buy from them. And so this is going to add two forces to our model. First, it's going to add demand imbalance. Okay, so even though all the farmers are selling the same homogeneous product, well, mostly homogeneous, just oil palm fruit, the buyers are going to have different quantity demand at different points in time. And second, something else that we capture in these markets is that there's often a lot of supply uncertainty. And so a lot of things are done informally. Business relationships are informal and changing. People's decisions may be stochastic. Their yield may be stochastic. And so we're going to incorporate the supply uncertainty. And because of those downstream contractual obligations, this supply uncertainty is going to be costly for the buyers. Okay, so these are kind of the two new elements that we're introducing to our study of this particular market. Okay. Just to give a little bit of anecdotal data to support these modeling decisions, first let's think about stochastic supply. Now, I'm sure many of you here already believe me that supply would be stochastic, but let me give some evidence from the Pempem platform. What I'm showing you here is supply from one particular seller as recorded on the platform, and I'm showing you weekly supply over a period of about half a year. Okay? And you can see that this weekly supply is, fluctuating a lot. There's some kind of cyclicity, but not really, right? There's just a lot of stochasticity in the total amount, which is the height of the bar. In addition, if we look at the color of the bar, we can see that a lot of these bars are green, okay? And this reflects this kind of loyalty behavior that's very common in these supply chains, where the sellers have a buyer that they're loyal to, and they'll sell to them almost all of the time. They've cultivated some kind of relationship. Sometimes they're even borrowing money from the buyer. And so that's why you see this loyalty phenomenon. But we see also there are different colors indicating that the supplier doesn't always sell to the same buyer. Right? Sometimes they're going to switch to a buyer who's offering a better price, and we indicate that in orange. But sometimes they also sell to some other buyer for some reason that we cannot back out from the data available to us, and so we have that in blue. Okay, so anecdotal evidence that there's a lot of sources of supply uncertainty and stochasticity. On top of that, though, we do see some of the things that affect how suppliers make their decisions. So first, location matters. So the plot on the left here is showing us that sellers are going to trade more or sell more with nearby buyers. Okay, so I have, just for simplicity, I'm coloring my buyers using two different colors, gray and red. And then on top of that, I have my smallholder sellers. They're the dots, and I'm coloring them by the color of the buyer that they sell the most to. Okay, okay, I don't have a lot of time, so let me keep going. Location matters. I'm coloring by the color of the buyer that they sell the most to. And you can see that, they tend to go to the closer buyer. And similarly, prices matter, right? What I'm plotting here is my supply on the y-axis as a function of the relative price set by the buyer for that day compared to other nearby buyers. Okay, and you can see that sellers do tend to sell more to buyers with better prices. Okay, so here's our model. I'm going to try to breeze through this because I want you to see our results. We're going to take all of those elements, put them in a very stylized model, just two buyers on a line, one at 0, one at 1, a continuum of sellers distributed between them. And we're going to have two types of sellers. We have loyal sellers who just always sell to the same buyer. They don't think about price or distance. And then we have informed sellers, and they make a rational utility maximizing selling decision. Okay, they're going to sell to the person who maximizes the price that they receive, net transportation cost. And the platform decision is going to be this lambda. This is going to be the fraction of sellers who are informed. And you can think of this as sort of the platform can, try to decide how much information to show, who gets to see information, or even just like how hard they work to capture the whole market. On top of that, we have buyer supply. We have our fraction of informed sellers, lambda, and that's going to go into determining the loyal supply to the platform, and then also the proportion of sellers who are informed, right? And so the informed sellers are going to make their purchase decision based on the prices set by the buyers. Then on top of that, we have supply uncertainty, and we're going to assume that the supply uncertainty comes from some distribution F, which could potentially depend on my level of transparency. Okay, and we have some assumptions just to give us tractability. Okay. And then finally, buyers are trying to maximize their profit. Okay, so we're going to have two buyers. We have these contractual obligations. One buyer is going to have a high demand. They need a high quantity to meet their obligation. The other buyer is going to have low demand, and we're going to draw randomly which buyer is who. And their profit is going to be given by their revenue from the supply, but also underage cost if the supply doesn't meet the contractual quantity, and overage or holding cost if the supply exceeds the contractual quantity. Okay, and so buyers set prices to maximize their expected profit, and the buyer sets transparency in order to try to improve for both sides, both for the sellers and the buyers. Okay, let me state our results very quickly. Our first result is a characterization of the competitive equilibrium. Just wanted to say that we can characterize analytically. I'm showing you what they look like on the screen. In the interest of time, I'm actually going to skip over this and tell you kind of our main result, which is a couple of things. Okay, our main result is that when transparency reduces supply uncertainty for buyers, there always exists some level of transparency that is strongly Pareto improving in competitive equilibrium. Okay, and so just to highlight a few things, it always exists, so that's great. The platform is going to help, but in general, we want an intermediate range of price transparency, so we don't want full transparency. Okay, why is that? Well, first, as we increase our transparency, we're transferring welfare from our buyers to our sellers, right? Because we're introducing more and more of this price competition. But in addition, what buys us this existence is that transparency is reducing supply uncertainty. Okay, so that's going to reduce my uncertainty costs. And it's also, very interestingly, enabling demand signaling. So the buyer with more demand who needs more quantity is able to have a higher price, and that's going to signal that they want more product. Okay, and so we see actually that sort of the mismatch between the supply and demand, or sort of the safety stock level, is going to be decreasing as we increase our transparency. Okay. On top of that, we want to say something about collusion, right? Because we just said that, well, the more transparency you give, the more you incentivize buyers to actually collude, because the competition is not good for them. So again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through the whole model of collusion with you, just say that there is one. We kind of use the standard repeated game approach, but here's our main result in that setting. First, we look at one natural collusive equilibrium. This is the one that's going to be profit maximizing for our two buyers. Okay. In this part A, we show that this equilibrium is going to be strongly Pareto improving if you have high enough transparency. In addition, we also worry about, well, stability of the equilibrium. Are we going to kind of stay at it over time? And we show that there always exists some collusive equilibrium, not necessarily profit maximizing one, that gives more profit to the buyers and is more stable than collusion without the platform, and is going to be improving for the sellers as well. Okay, and again, the intuition is there's this demand signaling, right? Because we have this difference in how much people are demanding, someone is going to want to raise their prices to indicate that they want more quantity than the other person. Okay, and so just want to say a few words about application. We do have implications for platform design. This means that platforms should think about having enough people on the platform, so having that lambda high enough. Platforms should also think about providing moderate transparency rather than full transparency. And platforms should also think about reducing uncertainty, because that is a driver of some of our results. Okay, so one way that Pempem could do this is, there's a field team out there anyway that's telling the farmers how to use the app. Well, maybe in the process of doing that, they can also provide other forms of decision support so that we can kind of back out how farmers are making their selling decisions. Okay. And I'd be happy to discuss offline what this means for Pempem. The main questions a platform might be asking is, well, should I try to reduce supply uncertainty? Should I provide moderate or full transparency? And so in the paper, we also go through a procedure for estimating the relevant parameters for Pempem and talking about what our results mean for partial versus full information and whether they need to reduce supply uncertainty. And so short answer is yes, Pempem should try to reduce supply uncertainty, and whether they should provide full or partial transparency to the sellers depends on kind of the geographic segment of the market. Okay, so that's all I have for you today. I'm happy to take, I think I have time for like 1 or 2 questions.
Can I just ask, when you talk about having some limited amounts of transparency, do you have a vision of what that would look like on Pempem? Is it as simple as like not giving some sellers the information?
Yeah, great question. The question was, how would you implement partial transparency, right? Like, how do you just like not show everyone everything? This is a big topic of discussion with the product team. A couple of things we've thought about is you can think about just showing a smaller number of buyers, not all the buyers, but kind of your closest few, and you can like expand that or contract that to get a larger or small lambda. We can also think about randomly giving people information. And so some people get information, some people don't. And this is something that's nice because you can couple this with whether they're providing information to the platform or not. But yeah, there's a couple of practical ways, but we're still kind of thinking this through. And then just to go to other platforms, for example, in platforms like Glassdoor, which provide salary information, they again have this sort of competing, like you don't want to provide too much information. And in those kinds of platforms, they often use average information. Yeah, so good question.
Turn the microphone on. Okay, yeah. So I have a question. Do you have an idea of a threshold after which it is efficient for Pempem to be active in an area, like a threshold for participation among the sellers?
Yeah, the question is, do we have a notion of a threshold of kind of market capture or participation before it's actually efficient, what Pempem is doing is efficient? It's a good question. I don't think we have such a threshold in mind right now. At least we have an estimated one. The platform is still very much in a growth phase. And so I think the goal right now is just to, capture a lot of many markets. Yeah, but I think once the platform is more at like a steady state phase rather than a scaling phase, I think that will be a very important question to ask.